From the University of California at Berkeley, I'm George Strait. Cal is one of the 10 campuses in this renowned public university system. Every day throughout the state, faculty, staff, and students pursue knowledge in the public interest. By focusing on this research in our new series of programs, we hope to show that California is indeed a state of minds. In this program, you'll see the oldest set of human skulls ever discovered and meet the man whose team found them in the dusty desert of East Africa. And you'll tour the living laboratories of the university's natural reserve system. From there, a preview of the new hospital at UCLA, and then a new meaning for thinking green. But first, I'll introduce you to Bob Dynes, the new president of the University of California. Like the man he succeeded, Robert Dynes comes to the office of the president from UC San Diego. Dynes took over as chancellor at UCSD in 1996, after 5 years as a professor there. Prior to that, he spent 22 years as a physicist at Bell Laboratories. Dynes began his tenure with a blunt assessment of the job ahead.
We also face some pretty daunting challenges. Population change will affect the university in two major ways. The first is what educators call tidal wave 2, the burgeoning number of children of the baby boomers. Secondly, the demographic change is affecting the ethnic composition of California. The population of our state, the most ethnically and culturally diverse in the country, must be reflected in the public university. We must represent all the people in the state of California. We must find ways to do that, to serve the whole population of the state of California, and we will.
Chancellor Dynes brought national attention to UCSD and played host to some very important visitors.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Chancellor Robert Dynes and Colleen Sabatini.
Everything that you've heard about President Clinton insofar as his ability to focus on what you're saying to him, his ability to convince you that what you're telling him is the most important thing at the moment, and his ability to come back later and relate things that you had said earlier is all true. Yeah, it was quite remarkable. He really has a deep and wide mind, and he looked at me with those steely eyes, and I felt as if he was penetrating me. It was really quite a remarkable experience. I certainly heard from a lot of people that it was inappropriate for President Clinton to come to UCSD. The reason for that is that people have political views. Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, also evoked passion in people. But my argument then, my argument continues. We're a university. We believe in balanced points of view, different points of view, bringing them all together. Again, people have the right, in fact, they have more than the right, they have the responsibility to express themselves in a respectful way.
Dynes valued diversity of opinion, scholarship, and people. When the state passed a law that banned the use of race as a factor in college admissions, the chancellor called on the UCSD community to find new ways to attract a student body that, as he said, looked like California. One of those was the founding of the Preuss School, a model secondary school for about 700 low-income students.
The Preuss School is an attempt to make a point, and that is that economic background has nothing to do with the innate ability and the motivation of young people. So we built a school that was based on young people that were highly motivated, that came from a very low economic background, and had one single curriculum, and that is college preparation. This year, the first graduating class will occur in 03-04, and so they will be applying to college. The only measure that I regard as serious is, have we been successful? How many of these young people that came from a background where there isn't a chance that they would have gone to a UC equivalent college, how many of these young people in this graduating class will go to a UC equivalent school? I'm watching that with great anticipation.
As Dynes explained to those who gathered to say farewell, becoming UC president was not something he ever envisioned.
This is really painful for me. I've made no mistake about the fact from the beginning that it wasn't at all clear I wanted to be president of the University of California. But I'm a racehorse, I'm a hockey player, and I got a challenge in front of me. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let anybody else do it.
And leaving San Diego for Oakland was difficult, personally and professionally.
I've had a passion for doing physics for 35 to 40 years. I love doing physics, just absolutely love it. I love having students in my laboratory. But I came to the conclusion, and it was a little hard on my own ego, but I concluded that I could have, no matter what I accomplished in my laboratory, didn't matter. Beyond my wildest dreams and accomplishment in my laboratory, I could have more impact as a president of the University of California on people and change more lives by the decisions that I make than I could in my laboratory. The University of California is, in my view, the fiber that holds California together. It is the investment in the future. I don't know any other institution that is the same investment as the University of California. Investment in economy, the investment in culture, it is the long-term investment to the future. And so we have to be thinking about what California is going to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we have to be positioning California to accommodate and to grow and to maintain that, what I call the spirit, which is California. And that's our job.
We turn now from the living to the search for our ancestors, as the head of the UC Berkeley team recounts their discovery of a major piece of the puzzle in human evolution. Here's Julie Wong.
They are the oldest human remains ever discovered, the 160,000-year-old fossilized skulls of 2 adults and a child.
This is our earliest ancestor, our earliest Homo sapiens.
UC Berkeley paleoanthropologist Tim White co-led the team of scientists who found the fossils in Herto village in eastern Ethiopia.
We look to these new fossils from Herto. They're very exciting because they are so much like ourselves.
And this is what our ancestors may have looked like, as shown by an artist rendition for the journal Nature. The announcement in Nature was the culmination of 6 years of work for White and his team, which began with a chance encounter in the fall of 1997.
We were driving out to one of the sites that we had found some fossils at a year before. We stopped the car and saw a hippopotamus cranium eroding out of the sands. And so we marked that as a spot to go back to, and we went back in about a week and a half. And my graduate students and a Turkish colleague found pieces of hominid cranium on the surface.
There were hundreds more cranium pieces buried between layers of volcanic ash and glass. Scientists at the Berkeley Geochronology Center used this mix of sediments to test and date the skulls. Back in Ethiopia, White and his colleagues cleaned and restored the skulls. White's team named the completed fossil a new subspecies, Homo sapiens idaltu. In the Afar language, idaltu means elder. And the age and appearance of these elders, White says, supports genetic evidence that modern man arose in Africa between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago, and not in multiple locations in Europe and Asia, as other researchers suggest.
The real debate over the last 20 years has been, what about Neanderthals? Where do they fit in the family tree? And now we have evidence of hominids from Africa that are much more modern than Neanderthals, much more like ourselves. We have on this individual a face that has a depression right here underneath the orbit, right in front of the cheek. It's called a canine fossa. All modern humans have this canine fossa. Neanderthals and more primitive African forms lack that because their face juts out more in front of the cranium. So what we have in this form is an anatomy that we see only among modern people.
White studied not only the facial features of these early ancestors, but also how they lived.
So we know about the environment. They were near a freshwater tropical lake. It would have been the equivalent of a modern African game park. Now, what about what they were doing? Well, we can learn that from analyzing the things that they left behind. And in this case, these are stone tools. And so by studying those stone tools, we can learn about their behavioral capabilities, how far they were going to get special raw materials to make these stone tools. And we can learn what they were doing with the stone tools by studying the animal bones and the associations with the stone tools. What we find is on those hippo bones, we have deep cut marks made by the use of these stone choppers. We have shallow cut marks made by the very sharp flakes that were used to slice meat away from these hippopotamus.
Cut marks were also found on the child's cranium, which White says is an indication of early mortuary practices.
And what we found in working on these skulls, cleaning them and putting them together, is we found on the base, especially of the child's cranium, down in the nooks and crannies of the cranial base, very fine marks that were made when the bone was fresh, 160,000 years ago, by the edge of a very sharp tool, probably volcanic glass, probably obsidian. This was made as somebody, after the child died, cut the flesh away from the cranial base and opened the cranial base. We know this because the edges are all polished, probably to remove the brain, and then continued to handle this child because we see a polish all around the high and projecting points. We see these kinds of activities today in tribes where the skulls of the dead, skulls of ancestors, are kept around as a kind of a ritual or religious rite.
While the Herto skulls have yielded significant answers about human evolution, it has raised a host of new questions as well.
We haven't found a single bone from the rest of the body. So this really is a mystery to us. What were they doing with the rest of the body as they were manipulating these heads? And what was involved in this process?
White and his team will be digging for these answers when they return to Herto village in November. He is confident the natural erosion of the desert region will bring new fossils to the surface. This is Julie Huang in Berkeley.
Next, a UC classroom can mean more than 4 walls and a chalkboard. Mike Poe reports.
These marine biology students do a lot more than listen to lectures about undersea environments. They go out and study them firsthand. This preeminent bird ecologist doesn't just study acorn woodpeckers. He practically lives with them. When educators wanted to get young Latino students excited about going to college to study botany or biology, they gave them the chance to grow native plants and restore a meadow.
Excellent. And what's the other one? California? Brome. Cool. Good job, you guys.
And when a Minnesota college professor wanted to teach her students about the diversity of California ecosystems, she knew where her class could spend weeks investigating those systems up close. Welcome to the University of California Natural Reserve System, where the classrooms have no walls and construction of the laboratories took millions of years. The NRS was established in 1965 to protect representative samples of California's rapidly disappearing natural ecosystems for teaching, research, and public outreach. Today, the system has grown to encompass 34 sites and more than 130,000 acres. University professors understand that the best way to teach students about the environment is to take them out into the environment, to observe its workings firsthand. They bring classes to the reserves to learn about the wide range of subjects, from archaeology and art to ecology, geology, and zoology. Every January, Professor Pam Kittleson visits reserves throughout California with her students from Gustavus Adolphus University in Minnesota.
I had worked in the reserve system for my PhD, and it was just a great place to plug students in, to field studies and also to meet the managers and the stewards and graduate students who are doing research in the reserves and get a taste of what it's like to be a professional biologist in the field.
For researchers, the reserves provide protected areas where scientists have access to sophisticated equipment and the freedom to conduct long-term research without concern that their experiments will be disturbed. Walt Koenig studies acorn woodpeckers at the Hastings Reserve in the Carmel Valley.
In order to do the kind of work we're interested in, we really need to have a lot of access to the land. We need to be able to go there anytime, to be able to catch birds, because often we're catching them at pre-dawn, and doing just crazy things to try to figure out some particular problem or do some experiment.
Frank Davis and his colleagues study oak trees at the 5,900-acre Sedgwick Reserve in the Santa Ynez Valley near Santa Barbara. Their goal is to find out why California's classic oak woodlands are slowly disappearing from the landscape.
Perhaps the most distinctive thing about the work we're doing is that it is over a large area and over a long time period. When you study an organism that lives many centuries, a 1 or 2 year study isn't very informative. Just one other point about oak woodlands, most of them are privately owned. Roughly 90% of the oak woodlands, if you include valley oaks as well as blue oaks. And so actually getting access to places to conduct long-term controlled studies is not simple. And that's why a place like Sedgwick Reserve presents such a great opportunity for us.
Kevin Lafferty from the U.S. Geological Survey focuses his research on the ecology of California's remaining saltwater marshes.
We do our research at Coal Point and Carpinteria Salt Marsh, and as well as other estuaries up and down the coast. But one of the reasons we focus on the reserves is because we can do manipulative experiments there, and also because the systems are relatively intact.
Though public access to the reserves is carefully controlled to protect ongoing research, outreach and education are an intrinsic part of every reserve's mission. At the Coal Oil Point Reserve on the coast near UC Santa Barbara, beachgoers have a unique opportunity to observe and learn about the threatened western snowy plovers, who have begun to breed and raise chicks in the protected upper dunes. At the Big Creek Reserve in Big Sur, science teacher Kim Smiley regularly holds biology classes for local children, using her collection of preserved animals and skulls. And at the Sedgwick Reserve, hundreds of students from local elementary and middle schools come to the reserve throughout the school year to work on restoration projects. For many of the students, it is their first chance to experience nature.
I like coming out here because I like learning about plants and other environments.
I hope that the kids take away from Ken the whole idea of preservation, of going out and enjoying nature, and thinking about planting for the future.
The people who benefit most from the natural reserve system are the citizens of California. While the reserve's teaching and outreach programs help create an informed and environmentally aware public, reserve-based research projects help preserve the state's natural systems and our place within them. This is Mike Poe in Davis.
We now go to Los Angeles and the ongoing construction of the new UCLA Medical Center in Westwood. It's due to open in 2005. Renowned architect I.M. Pei and his son designed the building to embrace what they called the healing power of light.
Architecture is not the walls. The architecture is the space. It's the void. And how do you animate the void? How do you make that space, which is really what we're making, how do you make it really come to life? And the only way you can do it is with light.
You have conceived a hospital that gives emphasis to spiritual healing, is being constructed to maximize natural light, that you are providing for gardens so that the patients who are hospitalized on the psychiatric service or hospitalized in the children's hospital are going to have the ability to get outdoors and to try to heal themselves in that way.
Well, this is what you just said, to make it a cheerful place.
All of us are tuned to the light. We sleep during the dark, we wake during the lighting periods of the day, and that actually synchronizes the way in which the brain works. And so it's very, very important that natural daylight be part of this healing environment in this hospital. And in fact, that's what IMPE has done for us, has created extraordinary opportunity for every individual to be connected with the day-night cycle, which is so important in regulating the way in which the brain works.
There will be two separate entrances. This one, a smaller, less intimidating admitting area for the Mattel Children's Hospital portion of the building. And this, the dramatic main entrance off of Westwood Boulevard within the UCLA campus.
By cutting away at the building and making it smaller pieces, if you will, at the top, we're actually able to have some views out from those windows.
The fact that we are going to have a lot of light in the hospital, and we'll have greenery in the hospital, and it's going to have a sense of smallness because of the 4 towers, and we're going to have multiple elevators so that patients aren't on elevators with food carts, and you know, the ordinary visitor isn't going to have to ride up an elevator with a patient. All these things, these little things that are so deficient in the present hospital, all these things are really percolated up from the staff.
We have designed the medical center so that each patient will be in an individual private room, and that's a major accomplishment. And in addition to that, the rooms have been designed to be sensitive to the needs of the families as well, so that every room will have a kind of a bench that's laid into a window that they can sit at, eat at, and also sleep if needed, that they can actually be with the patient the entire time and actually spend the night.
I think it's more than just beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. I think that based on all the input that the doctors and department heads gave IM, and his absolute mastery at the use of light, which if you'll ask any attending physician or nurse, they will tell you that's a critical component in patients' well-being and increasing their ability to get out of the hospital quicker. I mean, what he did is genius. I mean, it's absolutely astoundingly brilliant.
This is the house that Pei built, or at least designed, and I don't think people can forget it. It's brilliant, and it's IM.
Finally, a small solution to a big problem for those who need access to cars on 2 University of California campuses. Larissa Brandon has the story.
San Francisco Bay Area is renowned for thinking green, and green, as in green Volkswagen Beetles, is what it means here. UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco have joined forces with City Carshare, a 3-year-old Bay Area car-sharing organization.
City Carshare is a community-based, nonprofit organization that's dedicated to reducing automobile dependency for people who live in the Bay Area. Specifically, we allow people, our members, to use our cars when they need one so they don't have to own their own car. And that saves them thousands of dollars, but it also, in the region, saves us on parking and congestion problems in our communities. From the university's standpoint, what's attractive to them from City Carshare is the ability to reduce the number of people driving onto campus and driving into the university setting, and to reduce the parking demand, which is very expensive for them to continue to build more parking garages and parking lots, while still allowing students, faculty, and staff to have the mobility that they'd like to have.
Both UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco are now offering their campus communities the option of using City Carshare as an alternative to taking mass transit or other forms of transportation. For student and faculty use, 2 of City Carshare's signature green Volkswagen Beetles are available on campus 24 hours a day. Members simply call or log on to the website to reserve a car. There are now 41 Carshare locations around the Bay Area. Tracy Wilcoxon, a senior at UC Berkeley, is an active City Carshare member.
I saw this vehicle when it came to campus one day, and I read about the program. I went online and read about it, and it was like the dream come true. My roommates and I had always said, I wish there was some kind of car sharing program, and so when we found out that there really was, I jumped on it and signed up right away. It's $10 a month to be a member, and then it's $3.50 an hour to use it. And so it definitely fits into the budget compared to the cost of having a car up here and parking and gas and everything. The cost is great.
Wilcoxon uses the car most for grocery shopping, a routine task she and her roommates once considered a luxury.
Every time we had to go get groceries or anything we needed a car for, we'd always have to call tons of people and ask them if we could borrow their car or wait for groceries for a whole month before we'd go and get any. So it was always a big hassle.
Across the bay at UC San Francisco, it's parking that's a big hassle.
The parking at UCSF is notoriously bad. There are only 1,000 spaces or so for the more than 10,000 folks who come here every day, who work here. And then we have a very, very large percentage of our folks, thousands, who come in by public transportation. And I think, like most businesses, there are needs and occasions when they need to have a car, when public transportation just does not meet their needs. And again, that's why City Carshare, I think, is such a perfect partner in this effort that we've had.
To be eligible for City Carshare, drivers must be 21, have a valid California driver's license, and a clean driving record. There's a $30 application fee that covers processing costs and a one-time $300 damage deposit that's returned to users upon leaving City Carshare. So far, about 100 UC Berkeley faculty and students have signed up with City Carshare, and at UC San Francisco, about 70 are members.
Every City Carshare vehicle that we put out on the street is taking 6 cars off the street. 25% of our members sell their car within 3 months of joining City Carshare. And we think this is really going to take off all around the Bay Area and also around the country as people realize that they don't need to own a car in order to get around the city, that they can have all the benefits of driving without the hassles of ownership.
In Berkeley, I'm Larissa Brannon.
That's our program. Thank you for joining us here at State of Minds. We'll be back in January. From UC Berkeley, I'm George Strait.